Why does a battle fought nearly 1,000 years ago in England still matter today, especially for those of us living in the United States? The year is 1066. It's a date that rings a bell for many, but its true significance goes far beyond a simple change of kings. This single year set in motion a chain of events that would not only reshape the British Isles, but also, centuries later, leave a deep and lasting imprint on the United States. To understand 1066 is to witness a moment where military strategy, political ambition, and cultural transformation collided, creating a new world whose echoes we still hear today. It all started when William, the Duke of Normandy, crossed the English Channel with a bold claim to the English throne at the infamous Battle of Hastings. His forces defeated the Anglo-Saxon army led by King Harold II. But this was more than just a victory in battle. It was the beginning of a revolution. William the Conqueror didn't just take the crown. He fundamentally re-engineered English society from the top down. A new Norman ruling class swept in, replacing the old Anglo-Saxon lords. This wasn't just a personnel change. It brought a complete overhaul of land ownership, the aristocracy, and the very systems of law and taxation. The Normans introduced their continental ideas about feudalism, a strict hierarchy where land was exchanged for loyalty and military service. They built imposing castles, established a more centralized administration, and made French the language of power and prestige. This created a fascinating hybrid society where old English traditions were forced to merge with new Norman customs, forging a new complex English identity. These immediate changes in England had incredibly long-term consequences. The governance structures that would eventually define the British Kingdom were born in this era. Think about the development of common law, where legal decisions are based on precedent, or the codification of property rights, which became central to English and later American life. The monarchy itself transformed, with the king's authority now deeply intertwined with a network of powerful nobles and administrators. This system, forged in the aftermath of conquest, would evolve over centuries and provide the institutional blueprint for a global empire. When British colonists eventually set sail for North America, they didn't just bring their belongings, they brought this entire framework of power, property, and law with them. So, how exactly did a medieval conquest in England jump across the Atlantic? It happened almost without anyone realizing it. The colonists who founded settlements in Virginia, Massachusetts, and New York were operating within legal and social structures that traced their lineage directly back to post-1066 England. The way they organized land ownership, set up local courts, and structured their own governance was deeply influenced by these centuries-old norms. It's a remarkable continuity, showing how a single historical moment can send ripples across continents and centuries. The very DNA of early American towns contained the echoes of a battle fought nearly 700 years earlier. Beyond law and politics, the cultural impact was just as profound. Let's talk about the language you're hearing right now. The Norman Conquest triggered a linguistic fusion. The Norman French of the ruling class blended with the Old English of the common people, creating what we now call Middle English. This new hybrid language eventually evolved into the modern English that would become dominant in the United States. It's not just the words themselves, but the concepts, idioms, and ways of thinking embedded within the language that crossed the ocean. This linguistic legacy was the vehicle for transmitting literature, philosophy, and religious ideas that shaped colonial education and public life. The influence didn't stop there. The Normans were master builders and military strategists. Their revolutionary castle-building techniques and fortification designs were copied across the British Isles, Later, these principles were adapted in the American colonies. If you look at the layouts of early fortified towns or the organization of local militias, you can see a conceptual lineage. The idea of combining political authority with military innovation to secure territory and control populations was a lesson learned in 1066 and applied on a different scale in the New World. Socially, the conquest created a much more rigid class system in England, cementing the distinctions between the nobility, the clergy, and the peasantry. This sense of social hierarchy, land tenure, and local governance traveled with the English settlers, while the New World offered more social mobility. This inherited perception of class and power still shaped the development of colonial society. The tension between the old, rigid hierarchy of Europe and the new, more flexible realities of the American frontier became a defining feature of early American life. Economically, the Norman conquest set new precedents as well. The massive redistribution of land after 1066 created patterns of wealth and property management that endured for generations. The Norman kings were also far more effective at collecting taxes and regulating commerce. These fiscal policies and legal frameworks for controlling the economy laid the groundwork for the system that would later govern the relationship between Britain and its American colonies. The conquest didn't just change who held power, it changed how wealth itself was organized, a principle that carried over into the administration of the early American states. Even religion was reshaped. William the Conqueror made sure the English church was loyal to him, replacing Anglo-Saxon bishops with his own Norman appointees and reforming monasteries. This tight entanglement of church and state influenced everything from ideas about royal legitimacy to social obedience. These norms informed how different religious groups in the colonies, whether Puritan, Anglican, or Catholic, organized their communities and viewed the role of religious institutions in civic life. The very structure of spiritual authority in America bore the subtle imprint of this nearly thousand-year-old political maneuver. Ultimately, what the Norman conquest created was a dynamic, hybrid culture. The fusion of Norman and Anglo-Saxon traditions produced a society that was surprisingly adept at absorbing new influences while holding on to its core identity. This mindset of adaptability, of blending tradition with innovation, was carried across the Atlantic. It was a crucial tool for the colonists as they navigated the immense challenges of settling a new continent, establishing trade, and dealing with conflict. In a way, this resilience can be traced back to 1066, a moment that proved the society could not only survive conquest but emerge with a new, stronger identity capable of global expansion. The historical line from 1066 to the founding of the United States also involves the evolution of political ideas. The constant tension between the monarchy's centralized authority and the desire for local autonomy that began after the Norman conquest led to major constitutional developments in England, like the Magna Carta and the rise of Parliament. These very principles of limited government and representation fueled American revolutionary thought centuries later. The seeds of American independence were, in a way, sown in the political soil tilled by the Norman conquest. When you compare the governance of the UK and the US today, you can still see these connections. Both rely on codified laws, structured hierarchies, and established courts. The American states, however, adapted these English precedents to a new republican framework, emphasizing written constitutions and local sovereignty. This reflects centuries of political evolution that began with the consolidation of power after 1066. So, from language and law to social structure and even religion, the events of 1066 were not just a turning point for England. They were a catalyst that sent shockwaves across history. These patterns were carried by English settlers to North America, where they were adapted and transformed, ultimately shaping the identity, values, and institutions of the United States. It's a powerful reminder that history is not a series of isolated events, but a continuous flow. The actions of a Norman duke, nearly a millennium ago, are still subtly shaping our world today, and that's a connection worth remembering. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey through history fascinating, don't forget to like, subscribe,